Imperfection is courage because it asks us to stand in a place where we are most vulnerable, where our weaknesses and flaws are visible, and still choose to show up anyway. The world constantly teaches us to polish our image, to cover our scars, and to pretend that everything about us is whole and complete. Yet, it is in those cracks and scars that our true strength shines through, because courage is not about having no flaws, but about daring to embrace them openly. Perfection demands silence about our struggles, while courage allows us to admit we are human and learning. When we allow ourselves to be imperfect, we allow ourselves to be free. Many of us grow up believing that courage is only found in heroic acts, great accomplishments, or public recognition. We think bravery looks like never failing, never stumbling, and always knowing what to do. But real courage is often quieter, found in the moments when we decide to keep going despite the weight of our insecurities. Courage is saying yes to life even when we are filled with doubt. It is waking up every day and allowing the world to see us without guarantees of acceptance. Imperfection teaches us that courage is not about removing fear, but about moving forward with it. Every time we admit a mistake or confess we don't know the answer, we face the possibility of judgment, yet we also step into authenticity. That step requires strength, because being imperfect in a world obsessed with control feels like rebellion. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the presence of honesty, and honesty always carries the risk of rejection. Still, that risk is where genuine connection and meaning are born. When we allow ourselves to be imperfect, we invite others to do the same. Instead of creating an atmosphere where everyone feels pressured to hide behind masks, we model what it looks like to show up with our true selves. This shared humanity dissolves the impossible standards that weigh us down. We give people permission to breathe, to stumble, to admit they are tired, and in doing so, we create a culture of compassion instead of competition. That is the heart of courage. It lifts not only us, but those around us. Perfection, on the other hand, chains us to an illusion that can never be satisfied. It whispers that we will be worthy only when we achieve more, perform better, or hide our flaws completely. This endless striving for a flawless image keeps us trapped in fear, because one mistake feels like it will unravel everything. Courage frees us from that prison, reminding us that our value is not tied to performance but to presence. By embracing imperfection, we unlearn the toxic belief that our worth must be earned. Courage is often born in small acts that no one else sees. It is the student raising their hand to ask a question even though they are afraid of looking foolish. It is the parent admitting they don't have all the answers but still showing up for their child with love. It is the leader confessing to their team that they made a mistake, but also showing the way forward. These ordinary acts of honesty are powerful because they demonstrate that courage doesn't require perfection, only willingness. Imperfection makes courage accessible to everyone. When we look back at our lives, the moments that shaped us were not the ones where everything went perfectly. They were the times we stumbled, failed, and still found a way to rise again. Each scar tells a story of courage, of a moment when imperfection became proof of resilience. By embracing imperfection as courage, we begin to see that our flaws are not barriers, but bridges to growth. And when we walk those bridges with openness, we live not as perfect beings, but as brave ones. Vulnerability builds connection because it reveals the parts of us that are most real, the parts that people can actually relate to. When we try to appear perfect, we create distance because no one can truly connect with a flawless mask. The courage to admit our struggles allows others to recognize their own experiences in ours, and that shared recognition is the root of belonging. People don't connect through success alone, they connect through the trials and imperfections that make us human. By being vulnerable, we remind others that they are not alone in their journey. Every meaningful relationship we form is strengthened by the courage to be open, Even when it feels risky, vulnerability means showing someone the fears we usually hide, confessing our doubts, or sharing a dream we are afraid might fail. These moments of honesty break down walls and invite trust. Without vulnerability, relationships remain shallow, limited to surface level exchanges where authenticity is missing. It is in vulnerability that trust grows, and trust is the foundation of every lasting connection. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we create a safe space for others to do the same. A leader who admits they don't have all the answers encourages their team to bring ideas without fear of judgment. A friend who confesses their insecurities opens the door for another friend to share theirs, creating a bond that performance can never achieve. Vulnerability becomes contagious, spreading courage from one person to another. Through that courage, deeper connections are built and empathy flourishes. We often fear that if we show vulnerability, people will think less of us, yet the opposite is usually true. When we admit our imperfections, people see us as more relatable, more approachable, and more human. Think about the moments when someone you admire shared a personal struggle. It didn't weaken their image in your eyes. It made them more authentic. Vulnerability strips away the illusion of perfection and replaces it with honesty, and honesty draws people closer. Instead of weakening bonds, it strengthens them. Connection cannot grow where vulnerability is absent, because without it, people cannot see the truth of who we are. Pretending to be perfect creates a barrier, and people sense the distance, even if they cannot name it. But when we are willing to be vulnerable, that barrier falls, and the possibility of genuine connection arises. Vulnerability bridges the gap between isolation and belonging. It transforms interactions from performances into meaningful encounters where people feel seen and valued. It is important to remember that vulnerability is not weakness, it is courage in its rawest form. Sharing your struggles does not mean you are fragile. It means you are strong enough to let others see the truth. It takes far more strength to say, I need help, than it does to hide behind silence. Vulnerability teaches us that connection is not about impressing others, but about being willing to be seen fully with all our light and shadows. This truth is what makes relationships real. The most powerful connections in life are built not on perfection, but on shared humanity. When someone says, I've been through that too, the weight of isolation begins to lift. Vulnerability opens the door to those moments of resonance where we realize that despite our differences, we are all walking through the same human struggles. By choosing to be vulnerable, we choose to connect deeply, to replace performance with authenticity, and to build bonds that withstand judgment, failure, and time. Vulnerability doesn't weaken connection. It is the very thing that makes connection possible. Authenticity over perfection is a choice that requires bravery in a world that constantly pushes us to perform. Many people believe they will be loved only if they present the best version of themselves, carefully hiding flaws and struggles. But what truly draws others in is not the polished image, but the raw truth of who we are. Authenticity is magnetic because it carries honesty, and honesty builds trust. When we are authentic, we stop striving to be impressive and start striving to be real. The pressure to be perfect can feel overwhelming, especially when we compare our lives to others. Social media, cultural expectations, and even family standards convince us that perfection is the key to acceptance. But this pursuit creates loneliness because perfection is a mask, and masks keep people at a distance. Authenticity breaks that cycle by allowing us to say, this is me, flaws and all. That courage to be seen makes relationships genuine and our lives meaningful. Authenticity doesn't mean broadcasting every detail of our lives, but it does mean showing up with integrity. It is about aligning what we say with what we do and letting our values lead rather than fear of judgment. People respect honesty even when they disagree because truth carries a power that performance never can. Perfection may win applause for a moment, but authenticity builds loyalty for a lifetime. Living authentically is not about pleasing everyone. It is about being true to ourselves. Perfection often feels safer because it keeps us hidden behind walls of control. When we are perfect, we feel untouchable, but we are also unreachable. Authenticity, on the other hand, requires risk because we open ourselves to being misunderstood or rejected. Yet, it is only through authenticity that we discover who truly accepts us as we are. The relationships built on authenticity are stronger because they are grounded in truth rather than performance. Safety in perfection is an illusion, but freedom in authenticity is real. Choosing authenticity over perfection also allows us to embrace growth. When we pretend to be flawless, we leave no room for mistakes, and mistakes are the greatest teachers. Authenticity says, I am still learning, and that mindset creates space for improvement without shame. Perfection stifles progress because it insists that anything less than flawless is failure. Authenticity welcomes imperfection as part of the journey, turning setbacks into stepping stones instead of roadblocks. In our personal and professional lives, authenticity creates deeper influence than perfection ever can. A leader who admits to mistakes earns more respect than one who pretends to never fail. A teacher who shares their struggles inspires students to try even when things are difficult. A parent who shows authenticity teaches children that they are enough without having to prove it through perfection. Authenticity builds trust in every area of life because people can sense when someone is being genuine. Trust cannot be manufactured. It must be earned through truth. Living authentically requires courage because it goes against the grain of a society obsessed with appearances. It means choosing to speak when silence would be easier, choosing to show vulnerability when hiding would feel safer. Authenticity demands that we accept rejection as a possibility, but remain true to who we are anyway. And in that courage, we find liberation, because there is nothing more freeing than dropping the mask and being seen as ourselves. Authenticity may not guarantee approval, but it guarantees peace of mind, and that is worth more than perfection ever could be. Mistakes are teachers because they reveal lessons that success alone could never teach us. When everything goes perfectly, we may feel confident, but we often overlook the small truths hidden in the process. It is in failure that we are forced to slow down, reflect, and understand what went wrong and why. Each mistake becomes a mirror, showing us not only where we stumbled, but also what we are capable of overcoming. Without mistakes, growth would remain shallow and incomplete. Every time we make a mistake, we are reminded that we are human and that learning is not a straight path. The discomfort that comes with failing is not punishment, but a signal that we are stretching beyond what is easy. Courage is found in choosing to see mistakes not as proof of inadequacy, but as opportunities for growth. When we adopt this mindset, mistakes transform from obstacles into stepping stones. They shape our resilience and prepare us for greater challenges ahead. Mistakes also teach humility, a quality that perfection can never foster. When we stumble, we are reminded that we do not have all the answers, and this awareness keeps us grounded. Humility allows us to listen more, to ask for guidance, and to appreciate the wisdom of others. Perfection isolates us by feeding pride, but mistakes connect us by reminding us of our shared humanity. They invite us to lean on one another and recognize that nobody succeeds alone. One of the greatest lessons mistakes teach is persistence. Each time we fail and choose to try again, we strengthen our ability to endure. Failure tests our commitment to our goals and reveals whether we are driven by passion or by the need for approval. Mistakes force us to confront discouragement and decide whether the vision we carry is worth the effort. Every retreat builds stamina, and with each attempt, we move closer to mastery. Without mistakes, persistence would never be tested or developed. Mistakes also cultivate creativity because they force us to seek new solutions when the old ones fail. When our plans don't work, we are pushed to think differently, to step outside the familiar and into innovation. Some of the greatest discoveries and inventions came from errors that opened unexpected doors. Mistakes expand our imagination because they show us paths we would have never considered otherwise. What we call failure often contains the seed of our most creative breakthroughs. Another vital lesson mistakes provide is empathy. When we fail, we understand more deeply what it feels like to struggle, and that understanding softens our hearts toward others. Empathy grows when we recognize that just as we fall short, so do the people around us. Instead of judging, we begin to encourage, knowing how powerful support can be during times of failure. Mistakes remind us that compassion is not weakness, but strength. They allow us to build communities where kindness replaces criticism. Ultimately, mistakes remind us that perfection is not the goal, growth is. Every failure carries a hidden gift, but it requires courage to unwrap it. Those who see mistakes only as defeat miss the chance to become stronger, wiser, and more resilient. But those who embrace mistakes as teachers discover a deeper sense of purpose in their journey. In every stumble, there is an invitation to rise higher than before, to become not flawless, but fearless. Perfection builds walls because it convinces us that only a flawless image will earn acceptance. When we focus on appearing without fault, we spend our energy hiding the very parts of ourselves that make us real. These walls become barriers not only between us and others, but also between us and our own growth. The need to protect our image keeps us from sharing our struggles and seeking support. In the end, perfection isolates us while pretending to connect us. The pursuit of perfection makes us guarded, always calculating what others might think if they saw the truth. Instead of speaking freely, we filter every word to maintain a flawless impression. Instead of reaching out when we are hurting, we suffer silently, fearing judgment or rejection. These protective walls give us the illusion of safety, but they actually trap us in loneliness. The higher we build them, the further away we drift from genuine connection. Perfection also builds walls inside of us, cutting us off from self-compassion. When we demand flawlessness, we silence the voice that encourages patience and replace it with harsh criticism. We begin to measure our worth by achievements and mistakes, forgetting that our value is deeper than performance. This inner wall keeps us from embracing our humanity and forgiving ourselves when we fall short. In chasing perfection, we deny ourselves the kindness we so freely give to others. Walls built by perfection prevent authenticity from flourishing in relationships. Friends, family, and colleagues may see only the surface, never the true self hidden behind carefully constructed appearances. Without authenticity, trust cannot grow because people sense when something is missing. Relationships built on perfection are fragile because they depend on performance rather than truth. Vulnerability tears down those walls, allowing authenticity to take root and connection to deepen. Perfection may promise belonging, but it only delivers conditional acceptance. When we present an image of flawlessness, we attract approval that is tied to performance rather than who we are. The moment we stumble, the fear of rejection returns, and we realize that the acceptance was never secure. Belonging requires us to be seen as we truly are, imperfections included. By keeping our walls up, we block the very thing we long for most, unconditional connection. The walls of perfection also stifle creativity and growth because they leave no room for mistakes. Innovation requires trial and error, yet perfection demands certainty before action. When we are too afraid to fail, we avoid risks that could lead to new discoveries and deeper learning. These walls keep us confined to what is safe, comfortable, and predictable. Growth requires the courage to step beyond them, even if it means stumbling along the way. Breaking down the walls of perfection begins with courage, the courage to let others see us as imperfect, evolving, and real. It means trading the illusion of control for the truth of vulnerability. When we lower the walls, we open ourselves to empathy, trust, and connection. We learn that people don't admire us for being flawless, They admire us for being authentic. In dismantling perfection's walls, we create a life built not on performance, but on genuine human connection. Progress, not approval, is the true measure of growth because it keeps us focused on our own journey rather than the opinions of others. When we chase approval, we surrender our direction to the shifting standards of those around us. What is celebrated today may be criticized tomorrow, and living for that external validation leaves us constantly unstable. Progress, on the other hand, is rooted in personal development and steady improvement. It is the quiet confidence that comes from knowing we are moving forward, even if no one else notices. Seeking approval often becomes a trap that drains us of authenticity. We adjust our behavior, our choices, and even our dreams just to fit the expectations of others. This pursuit might win temporary applause, but it leaves us disconnected from who we really are. Progress frees us from this cycle by reminding us that the only comparison worth making is with who we were yesterday. When we measure ourselves against our past self, we find motivation instead of pressure. Progress emphasizes effort over image, teaching us that the process matters more than the spotlight. A student who improves steadily in their studies may not receive the same recognition as a top performer, but their journey is equally powerful. An artist who practices daily, even without applause, is still building skill and discipline. Approval is fleeting and beyond our control, but progress is lasting and within our reach. Choosing progress ensures that we grow even when no one is watching. When we live for approval, we become afraid of failure because mistakes threaten the image we try to uphold. This fear keeps us from taking risks that could lead to greater achievements. Progress, however, welcomes mistakes as proof that we are learning and stretching beyond comfort. Every misstep is data. Every setback is a lesson that moves us closer to strength. With progress as our focus, failure loses its power to define us and instead becomes fuel for growth. Progress also brings peace because it shifts our attention from external noise to internal growth. Approval relies on praise and validation, which are never guaranteed and often inconsistent. Progress offers the steady satisfaction of knowing that no matter how small, we are advancing. This sense of peace allows us to continue even through criticism or rejection because we understand our worth does not depend on applause. In the long run, progress builds resilience while approval builds insecurity. Approval may feel rewarding in the moment, but it rarely sustains us through life's challenges. The applause fades, and if we rely on it, we are left empty and questioning our value. Progress, by contrast, gives us a foundation that cannot be taken away because it belongs to us. Each step forward, no matter how invisible to others, strengthens our confidence and independence. It teaches us to celebrate quiet victories, knowing that the journey matters more than the crowd's reaction. Choosing progress over approval ultimately leads to authenticity and fulfillment. It allows us to live according to our own values instead of bending to external pressures. When we focus on progress, we honor our unique pace and path, resisting the urge to measure ourselves against others. Approval is temporary, but growth is lasting, and growth shapes us into stronger, wiser, and more courageous individuals. By valuing progress, we find freedom from judgment and step into a life defined not by applause, but by purpose. Starting before you're ready is one of the most powerful forms of courage because waiting for perfection keeps us stuck. Many people spend their lives preparing endlessly, convincing themselves that one more plan or one more skill will finally make them ready. But readiness is an illusion because there will always be doubts, uncertainties, and fears. Courage is not about eliminating those fears, but about stepping forward in spite of them. Progress only begins when action replaces hesitation. The idea of waiting until everything feels perfect robs us of opportunities that may never return. Life rarely presents us with ideal circumstances, and if we wait for them, we risk missing the very moments that could change our lives. Taking action with shaky hands shows us that growth is born in the doing, not in the waiting. Each imperfect beginning builds experience and resilience. By starting now, we create momentum that perfection can never provide. Fear of failure is often the biggest reason people hesitate to begin. They imagine every possible outcome where things might go wrong and convince themselves that waiting will guarantee success. Yet the truth is, mistakes are part of every journey, and avoiding them only delays learning. Failure becomes a stepping stone when we allow ourselves to move forward without certainty. Beginning before we are ready teaches us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act with fear in our hearts. Starting imperfectly also builds authenticity because it shows others that we are willing to be human. People resonate with those who try, stumble, and try again, not those who wait for flawless performances. When we begin without everything in place, we show the world that progress matters more than appearances. That honesty is what inspires others to take their own leaps of faith. Authentic beginnings are far more powerful than perfect ones. When we start before we are ready, we discover strengths we never knew we had. Preparation can only take us so far. The rest must be learned through experience. Challenges that once felt overwhelming become manageable when faced head on. Each step forward equips us with new skills, insights, and resilience that planning alone could not provide. Readiness grows out of action, not the other way around. Momentum is another gift of starting early. A small, imperfect beginning creates movement that leads to bigger opportunities. Even if the first steps are messy, they generate energy and direction. That momentum carries us through doubt and keeps us focused on progress rather than perfection. Every major accomplishment begins with a single act of courage, and that act is simply choosing to start. Waiting keeps us stagnant, but starting creates flow. In the end, starting before you're ready is about trusting yourself and the process. It means believing that you have enough to begin, even if you don't have everything figured out. It means accepting that growth will happen along the way and that the journey itself will shape you. By stepping forward without guarantees, you embrace life with courage instead of hesitation. Every brave beginning plants the seeds of transformation, proving that courage, not readiness, is the real foundation of success.